We talk a lot about what players might step up, the players that need to step up, the difference in the offense and all of that type of thing when it comes to Michigan football. But one of the ways that I look at this upcoming season and say this is a good opportunity for the Wolverines is due to the schedule. We've talked a bit about the schedule. We're going to look at it a little bit in a different light, going game by game and discussing a little bit about each opponent. On this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We'll do 4 games per segment, but I decided to kind of compile some things and just talk a little bit about each team. We're going to look at what their record was last year, what their SP plus ranking is, as much as how much they're returning all in one piece, right? We've done it kind of separately. We're going to do it all together, and that should give us a little bit better of an idea of what you can kind of expect, how much a team could improve or get worse. And so let's do that, starting with the first game of the season, August 30th at home against New Mexico. A couple interesting things about the schedule. Number one, Michigan never plays 2 home games in a row. Kind of bizarre, right? We're accustomed to seeing Michigan playing at least 3 to start the season, if not 4, if not 5. Like last year was 5 home games in a row before they went on the road. Well, this one goes home away, home away, home away, home away, home away, away, home. It's an interesting way to go. Secondly, Michigan only plays, I think I'm reading this right. Yep, 3 teams that had a winning record last year. 3. So one of them is the defending national champion, who Michigan beat in Ohio State. The others only had winning records by just the slimmest of margins, and that was Nebraska and USC. Otherwise, like, the schedule really is amenable to Michigan. But let's go game by game, starting with New Mexico. Home game, opening the season. Would not be surprised if it's a night game, because we've seen that type of thing. You know, a team that you wouldn't expect to see night game. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's a nice noon game. Hey, let's make it our first 9 a.m. kick at Michigan Stadium. That'd be great. New Mexico was 5-7 last year. Certainly not the worst team on the schedule in terms of that, but when it comes to the SP plus ranking, it's the worst team Michigan will face. 132nd in the country. Their returning production rank is 135. It's the worst that any team has. That's a big, that if this isn't like a 50-7 type blowout or worse than that, then Michigan's really missed the mark. They really absolutely need to destroy this team, because they've got no returning production. They're expected to be the worst team, and they didn't have a winning record last year. Again, it's not the worst record of anybody, but New Mexico is certainly not the type of team that you would expect to contend with Michigan whatsoever. Up next is Oklahoma. Now, that one is one of the 3 games that I have circled as big danger. Now, I could point to 5 or 6 games on this schedule, but to me, there's 2 up front, and then obviously Ohio State at the end, because that's always going to be big danger no matter what. But Oklahoma, this game is in Norman. Sharon Moore going back to his alma mater to try to beat them. Oklahoma did beat Alabama last year. Right? They were, before Michigan, they were the last team to beat Alabama. And that's what kept Alabama out of the playoff, was the fact that they they lost to Oklahoma. Sorry. Talking a little too quickly there. Oklahoma was 6-7 last year, though, however. It is the second highest ranked team on the SP plus that Michigan faces at number 20 overall. And they've got the most returning experience of any team on this schedule, which usually means big jump. You can expect 3 games, if not more. They bring in John Mateer to be the quarterback. This should be a big jump. Brent Venables is going to be calling the defense, he says. Home game circled on the calendar, all of those things. It's a little bit of a scary game, right? The 10th most returning production. You think relatively highly of Oklahoma now. That said, it is still a team, even though it enters year 2 of SEC play, it is still a team comprised of a lot of Big 12 players. Can that do it? Now, Michigan in 2022 lost to a Big 12 team in TCU. So yes, they can. But If Michigan's smart about it, then it will be able to get out of there alive. But I think that is probably the second hardest game, not just because the SP Plus says it, probably the second hardest game on the schedule, because it's right out the gates. We don't really know what Michigan is. Oklahoma hopefully won't really know what it is either. Has an experienced, good quarterback. That does not bode well for the Wolverines. But the defense obviously does for Michigan. You ever have where you just get these pop-ups on your computer from like your top menu bar? They just pop up. Anyway, I digress. Got distracted. Third game of the season, Central Michigan was 4-8 last year, 121st ranked SP Plus, so the second worst team on Michigan's schedule, 80th in terms of returning production rank, so not great across the board. This one should be the next one that is like, maybe it's not 50-7, maybe it's more like 48-6, right? But that's what that should be. If it's not, it is a dereliction of duty on Michigan, another school that Sharon's making all the rounds, right? You get Louisville on here, and then it's everything, right? But he's going to be going to Oklahoma, where he played. He's going to be hosting Central Michigan, where he coached, and that's the very next game. Obviously, if that's not a big win, then you can just basically write off everything about Michigan football forever at that point. All right, last game of segment 1, last game before a bye week, and that is away to Nebraska. We've talked about Matt Rule, and he's certainly doing everything he can to give Michigan bulletin board material. Not that it matters that much. Nebraska had its first winning season in forever. Went 7-6, just a huge high water mark there for that program. They really just nailed it. They really just overachieved. It's 34th overall in SP Plus, one of the higher ranked teams. I think the 4th highest ranked, if I'm looking at this right. And SP Plus, a 50 is the rank as far as returning production. Should take a modicum of improvement. We're looking at probably 9 wins, I would guess, for Nebraska. That being a home game, Michigan's played the last game against Nebraska in Lincoln as well. The 2 games I've been to at Lincoln, Michigan's won. Dylan Raiola being the returning starting quarterback, that's another danger. Like, I think that one is a game that could easily be the second hardest game above Oklahoma potentially, because I think that they have more talent at quarterback. It's just unrealized talent at this point, but a lot to discuss there. Now, the middle of the schedule gets a little bit harder overall in terms of the SP Plus ranking, but then the last part is just kind of interesting. But let's get to the middle of the schedule, somewhat middling. It's a little above middling when it comes to some of the ranking stuff. But let's talk about the middle 4 games. We'll do so here in just a moment. But before we do, the Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts are picking the team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and Clear Cut Team of the Week are the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC, going 19-1. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in the ACC games, the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953 and 54. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Blue Devils have done here. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, Michigan didn't play any of the first 5 teams on the schedule, but then they play the next 3. The first team that we're going to look at here in the middle of the schedule is a home game against Wisconsin after a bye week. They play Wisconsin. It's kind of an interesting thing because normally see these West Coast trips come with a bye week before or after. That's not the case for Michigan this year. Kind of interesting. And there's a lot of travel. I mean, obviously you look at it and there's looking at 5 home games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games and 6 away games. But it's just kind of an interesting ebb and flow Wisconsin comes to town. They went 5-7 in Luke Fickell's second year, ranked 41st in SP Plus as far as returning rank, 25th. That's the second most of any team on the schedule. So that's going to be a team that maybe improves. They've got Billy Edwards at the quarterback position, new offensive coordinator, however, and I mean, they just haven't necessarily proven anything yet. Luke Fickell, being an Ohio State guy, obviously is going to want this game. I mean, everyone wants the game against Michigan regardless, but certainly Luke Fickell knows what playing against Michigan is all about. Not that it's always benefited him, but nonetheless, he's lost as the Cincinnati head coach. He's lost as the Ohio State interim head coach, and has not played Michigan since. But that game coming after a bye week, no matter what happens against Oklahoma and Nebraska, Michigan will be licking its wounds. However, I don't think that Michigan not necessarily always plays best coming out of a bye. Interesting. Tends to somewhat be the case, right? They tend to lose a lot of those, but I'm not that leery of Wisconsin. The next team Michigan has faced and had beaten last year. And this one, however, is on the West Coast, going to Los Angeles to play USC, who went 7-6 last year. 30th overall in SP Plus, 97th in return rank. I've got big questions about USC, but some of that can be negated just by the fact that Michigan has not tended to travel well to the West Coast when it comes to in-season play. And considering it's sandwiched in between other games, which I just feel like is weird, just considering as I looked around college football last year, it always seemed like teams had buys generally when they did that, but when they had to travel all the way across the country. But nonetheless, I think Michigan is probably a better team. Still unsure about quarterback is for USC, unsure about defense. And you look at where they're ranked. I mean, 30th is, I think, a little generous. USC has not been Texas, right? Texas has been to 2 playoff in a row. They've been to multiple BCS games. USC, it's still premature to call them back, but we all pretend like they are. So I don't know, but they'll certainly want to repay the favor of having lost at Michigan last year, 27-24. That game got close, obviously. Late, Michigan jumped out to a big start, looked like they were wiping the floor with them. I'm just not sure that USC can contend for a whole game yet. They lost a lot of talent. They've, like I said, 97th in returning production, not great for them. And breaking in a new starting quarterback after, I mean, he's had a couple games, but that's it. It'll just be interesting to see. Up next is Washington, who comes to Ann Arbor. Jed Fish's triumphant return after having not been in Ann Arbor since 2016. The last game he was in Ann Arbor for was the magical snow game against Indiana. So, but he'll be coaching on the other sideline, so it'll be interesting. I still think it's really cool that Jed remembered me, by the way. I didn't talk to him at Big Ten Media Days, but saw him when Washington was walking in, and he said hi to me. And some people will be like, how does this random photographer know Jed? No coach. Anyway, that's a little feather in my cap. I don't care, though. Except for he's a good guy. I really like Jed. But Michigan obviously lost at Washington. Different scenario that they're going to be leaving the greatest setting to come to the actual greatest setting in college football, which is the Big House. And but they were 6-7 last year. One game underneath the at least 500 benchmark. 38th in SP Plus ranking, 84th in returning production. New starting quarterback, lots of new pieces all over the place. They lose some receivers and stuff, such like that. Fish has been very good in the transfer portal, and he's obviously a great offensive mind. I've said this many a time. I'm going to repeat it. I think that they're a little ways away before we get to a point where we can say, yeah, okay, that's going to be for sure a win. I want to look at something randomly because I just realized I misspoke on something. I'm pretty sure I did. I did. Nope, I didn't. Never mind. I did not misspeak. So, never mind what I was thinking, saying, feeling, all of that stuff. Okay, back to the schedule. One more game we have in the first in that middle spot, and it is a team Michigan has beaten. You know them. You'll love them. No, you don't. You don't love them at all. There's no love lost. And that's Michigan State. This game is in East Lansing. They went 5-7 last year in Jonathan Smith's first year, 76th in SP Plus, 30th in returning production. This game, I think, has a little bit of danger because I think they'll be a little bit fired up. Aiden Childs returning. He was looking pretty good for a quarter against Michigan last year. I remember I even went up to, I have little faith. I went up to Rico Beard because I know a lot of you definitely hate Valeni. I'm sure you hate Rico Beard as well, but he's an acquaintance of mine. I like Rico. And I went up to him and I was like, as I was switching sides from first to second quarter at Michigan Stadium last year, I said, congrats on the win, man. I just don't think Michigan has it today. And he's like, oh man, you can't say that this early. And he ended up being right. So there you go. I generally don't concede games that early, but it just felt like Michigan could do nothing on offense and they couldn't stop them on defense. Now the game got to be pretty close for comfort. I think Aiden Childs can be a game changer. If he can cut down on interceptions and things of which he didn't have against Michigan, they could be a team that takes a step forward. Now, they lose a lot on defense. They return a lot on offense. So defensively, they were much better last year than they were offensively, but they're going to probably have to be more of an offensive-driven team this upcoming season. So it'll be interesting. It's in East Lansing, and but Michigan's, aside from 2021 in the last decade, Michigan's won. They have a better shot of winning in East Lansing than not. So we will see. All right, the last third of the season. Let's get to it. What do we think of these final four teams on the schedule? We will get to them here in just a moment. But before we do, attention Locked On Wolverines fans, have you ever wished that you could directly support your favorite Michigan athletes and be a part of their journey? Well, now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players that you love. Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing Michigan. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, get exclusive content straight from the athletes that you back, and the best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Michigan sports. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Michigan athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. The interesting thing about the Michigan 2025 schedule is there's no gauntlet. It's not a murderer's row, but like I talked about with the home away, and all of that, you get to figure out pretty early what Michigan is potentially good at. Then the next four games are teams ranked in the top 41. Michigan State's 76, and then you got 3 games to kind of have a tune-up before, spoiler alert, Michigan plays Ohio State to finish out the year. But Michigan plays its worst Big Ten foe in the new Barry Odom coached Purdue team who comes to town. 1-11 last year, hence no more Ryan Walters. He is now over at Washington as the defensive coordinator. Obviously, he also has no love lost for Michigan. We didn't talk about the Ryan Walters of it all, but De La Vie. 116th ranked SP Plus team Purdue is with the worst, second to worst returning production of any team on the schedule. 127th overall. It's not great, Bob. I kind of don't want to stick in with this game because it just feels like, this should be a massive blowout. Should be. But Barry Odom is a good coach. Granted, he coached at UNLV before. That game was not particularly close. Though, that's it. That's all I remember, really. It wasn't particularly close, and then I think he cried about it afterwards. Something. And that was the UNLV game, that was week 2 in 2023, right? So who was the coach of that one? Sharon was number 3. That was the one where it was the mixed coaching scenario, right? That was the one where the first half was Jay Harbaugh and the second half was Mike Hart. Because the first game was Jesse Minter. That's right. Okay. Just trying to get my head screwed on straight. Nonetheless, this should be a massive blowout situation, as very well could the next team that Michigan plays at Wrigley Field. Should feel like a home game. That's going to be interesting. November 15th. This is after a bye week. The second time that Michigan has a bye week. Finally I get my birthday week off. Michigan will be playing against the only team they blew out last year. That's Northwestern. They went 4-8 last year, 87th overall in terms of SP plus ranking, 57th in returning production. This is another one where I kind of just feel like, what are we going to talk about, right? Because there's no way, it's hard to sit there and look at Northwestern and say that they're going to be good enough to do something barring some just massive change. Now, defensively, if they can step it up, that's a pretty good deal, but Michigan's offense should be significantly better. It should know exactly what it's capable of by November 15th. It's only a week earlier in the year that they play them than last year. That's not great for them. If you're Northwestern, you'd rather get Michigan early, right? That's kind of where like Nebraska and Oklahoma, I think, would rather be. So that's kind of what I would look at as far as that. The next week is Maryland. Maryland always seems to be difficult regardless of how good or bad they are. They were 4-8 last year. Cleaned house as far as coordinators. This one's in College Park. We've seen 2021, Michigan went to Maryland and just absolutely destroyed them. 2023, it was a close game, but you had, no Jim Harbaugh, physically broken J.J. McCarthy, defense that decided it couldn't stop anybody. That Maryland team, I think, was a little bit better poised to deal with things than this one. 67th overall in SP plus ranking, 85th in returning production rank. I just don't see it unless Michigan just overlooks it, because guess who's next? Ohio State. So if I was to sit here and look at, before we get to Ohio State, because we have a few moments here, how would I rate these games? I'm going to go back to the front. New Mexico, absolute win. Oklahoma, toss up. I'm going to say Michigan, lean win. But that one could go either way. Like lean, I'm talking like 51%. Quarterback play and wide receiver play, offensive line play, it's all going to come down to that. So I'll go lean win with Oklahoma. Absolute win for Central Michigan. Lean win for Nebraska. So they could be 3-1, 2-2, 4-0. Either way. I think that they win against Wisconsin. I'd give them a more than lean win against USC, but traveling to the West Coast, you never know. I'm going to get them to get revenge against Washington. I think they'll handle Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland. So with that said, I'm basically saying Michigan would be going to the Ohio State game, which is a home game, with at worst 3 losses, and certainly could be 11-0. Kind of crazy to think after last year. Absolutely could be 11-0. I'm going to guess that it's probably going to be more like 10-1. I'm going to say it's going to be 10-1 right now. And then they're going to host Ohio State, who I just don't see having the answers. And here's the thing. Number 1 SP plus, that I think is presumptuous given the returning ranking is 101st. The third least experienced team on Michigan's schedule. Now they'll have 11 games of experience by the time that game comes around. This game being in Ann Arbor. I mean, it could be Julian Sand versus Bryce Underwood. I would probably venture to guess that's going to be the case. Both teams have a lot of talent. Ohio State has more talent on paper. I think Michigan's a development and evaluation of bringing in some four-star guys that might be better than they're advertised, I think is probably a bit better. New offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline, new defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia. I know that Ohio State's going to want this in the worst way, but I mean, the way they've been downplaying the rivalry after they lost to Michigan, that's not going to, from a mental standpoint, because suddenly you're celebrating the national championship and you're no longer saying, what am I doing to beat Michigan today? I think that is going to play some difference. So I think Michigan's probably going to finish the season somewhere around anywhere between 9-3, which in the regular season, and I mean, it could be undefeated. This is not the hardest schedule in the world. This is actually, again, the middling. You've got the middling middle. You've got 2 games on the early side that can make things a little bit more difficult. Yeah, Michigan could drop a game or 2 that you maybe don't think. They could drop that USC over Washington game. Michigan State could come on. I still just think this is Michigan, I think, has come to, even though that they lost some games last year, they shouldn't, Washington and Illinois. I think that Michigan is, at least now culturally a little bit, is going to tend to not lose games that it shouldn't. Not in the way that it used to, right? You lose to Iowa in 2011, right? Where you're like, why did they do that? Or 2016. Why did they lose that game? They had no business losing that. I just think that Michigan is going to tend to beat the teams it's supposed to is kind of where it's at. And there's going to be other teams there that are just going to pose challenges. If Michigan can stay healthy and improve where we think it will improve, I think Michigan's in really, really surprisingly good shape. Now, do I think it will win the national championship or the Big Ten? At this juncture, I'd say no. But I think that they could be a surprise team. I think it would be a team that everyone could be looking at and being like that from the outside looking in and say that team is a lot better than I thought they were going to be. That's my thought. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Peace.